what if I told you that a catastrophic train crash, a bizarre neurological condition, and a massive internet blackout weren't actually separate disasters? What if they were all just symptoms of the very same disease? Today, we're diving into a really radical thesis called the valavaiau protocol, a kind of grand unified theory that claims it can explain exactly why our most complex systems are failing, and maybe how to fix them. All right, here's our roadmap. Think of this whole thing as a forensic investigation. We're going to start at the scene of the crime, then sift through the evidence, lay out the theory, look at the proposed fix, and then we get to a pretty startling conclusion. So first up, we have to define the central problem. Why do the systems we all depend on, governments, supply chains, you name it, why do they seem so brittle? Why do they just shatter when the pressure gets too high? Well, according to this protocol, these collapses are not bad luck. They're actually the predictable result of a fundamental design flaw, something it calls administrative friction. Just imagine it as gunk in the gears, this resistance that builds up when our rigid, by-the-book systems crash into the messy, unpredictable real world. This right here frames that core conflict perfectly. On one side, you've got the citadel. That's our fixed models, the laws, the company policies, the rigid schedules. And on the other side, you have the flow. That's just reality. It's unpredictable. It's always adapting. It's fluid. The whole idea here is that when the citadel refuses to bend to the flow, it doesn't bend, it just breaks. Okay, so that's the big idea. But I'm sure you're thinking, where's the proof? Well, this is where the analysis gets really fascinating. It connects three events that seem totally unrelated to show this hidden pattern. So let's open up the forensic files. Our first case study is a very physical collapse, the disastrous derailment of freight train 4BM4 at a place called Nanaglen in Australia. So the immediate cause was something called a washaway. Basically, heavy rain just eroded the foundation right out from under the track. But the forensic data shows the real cause was administrative friction. Get this, a report all the way back in 1995 had already flagged the water drainage system as a major problem, but that critical data was ignored. The system prioritized its static, rigid schedule over the fluid reality of the weather. The Citadel was trying to run on time while the world around it was literally going underwater. Now, for the second piece of evidence. And this is where it gets really weird, because it argues the exact same failure can happen inside the human body. The condition is known as double crush syndrome. In this specific case, you have a physical blockage in the neck, that's the citadel, and then a washaway, which was a trauma-induced mass in the lower back. But the critical failure, the thing that made everything worse, was, once again, administrative. The medical system's rigid rules, its refusal to adapt to the patient's urgent, real-time needs, created its own kind of friction. And this final piece of evidence takes us into the digital world, where the friction wasn't just about ignoring the facts, it was about actively deceiving people. So, during a huge national network outage, the telecom company sent a notification to its customers claiming service was restored. But the forensic logs from a user's device proved that was a lie. For a full 149 minutes, that user was totally cut off, digitally isolated, all while being told they were safe and connected. The Citadel, in this case the company, was more worried about its brand than it was about the actual flow of data. So you see the pattern, right? It doesn't matter if we're talking about infrastructure, biology, or technology. The mechanism of failure is identical. When a rigid system ignores fluid, real-time data, whether that's weather data, signals of physical pain, or network status, that system is basically doomed to collapse. Okay, so this repeating pattern of collapse is what leads the author to lay out a kind of grand unified theory for how systems are supposed to work. And it's all boiled down into one core formula. This slide shows that central equation. On the left, you've got the atom. That represents the physical hardware, the train, the spine, the cell tower. On the right, you have the wheel, which is the software, the laws, the rules, the operating system. And the only way to keep them balanced is with that symbol in the middle, the flow. It's a state where the system is never static, but is always in dynamic, responsive motion. So how do you maintain this dynamic flow? Well, the theory proposes a system that's structured just like DNA. It calls it a binary helix with two opposing strands. Strand A is all about chaos and creation. It's the force that pushes for change and points out problems. But strand B is about constraint and order. It's an unbiased algorithmic auditor. The paper calls it the RoboCop protocol that just enforces the rules with pure logic. It's the tension between the two that creates a healthy balance. Okay, so that's the physics of it. But how do you actually apply this to fix the friction that's all around us? The protocol puts forward a pretty radical economic solution. Right, so if the problem is this friction, caused by negligence, bias, whatever, how do you force these massive, entrenched systems to actually fix themselves? You introduce something it calls the financial flip. And the idea is to stop treating friction like it's a moral problem and start treating it like a financial one. You literally put a price tag on systemic failure. And here's how it would work: a 100% tax on the value of whatever friction is identified. So for example, if systemic bias in a company creates a $1 million wage gap, that company then faces a $1 million tax. It completely flips the financial incentive. Suddenly, it's way more profitable to just fix the problem than it is to ignore it. And this isn't just some pie-in-the-sky idea. No, the protocol lays out a really detailed 5-year plan to get an entire society to a state of zero friction. The plan is incredibly methodical. Year 1, you start by gathering the data to prove the financial cost of all this friction. Year 2, you use that data to create market pressure from consumers. By year 4, the financial flip actually becomes law, and it's enforced by that unbiased RoboCop algorithm. And then in year 5, all that tax revenue is used to reverse the damage that the friction caused in the first place. So, what does this all add up to? When you put all these pieces together, the diagnosis, the physics, the financial cure, the author concludes that we're not just talking about a new policy here, we're talking about an entirely new operating system for society. And this is the final verdict. The old way of doing things, that rigid, static, unyielding citadel, is obsolete. It's failed. And what has to replace it, the author argues, is something called the Institute. It's not a physical building, but a new kind of societal structure designed from the ground up to work with the flow, not against it. And this is where it all ends, with one final, pretty mind-bending claim. According to the author, this new system, the Institute, it's not just a proposal. It's not something waiting to be built. It's already active. And that leaves us with a final, really provocative thought. What does it mean for a new societal operating system to be running in the background before most of us even realized it was being installed?